North Korea isn't exactly the friendliest country in the world. It has few allies. Ever since it was formed in the aftermath of the Korean War, it's been ruled by one family and three men, all members of the Kim family, who ruled it as a hardline authoritarian communist state. The small country is known for its aggressive foreign policy, waging small-scale attacks against its neighbor South Korea, taking foreign hostages, and developing a nuclear program that it repeatedly uses to menace foreign countries, especially the United States. Even most other countries that don't have friendly relations with the US shy away from North Korea due to how unpredictable the country can be, with a few big exceptions. In recent years, China's taken a more moderate stance in terms of its economic policy. The massive country run by the Chinese Communist Party since the days of Mao Zedong opened its economy and repealed the infamous one-child policy. But there's one area where it hasn't moderated at all: foreign policy. Rather, China's actually begun to take a more aggressive posture in the region. They've expanded into the South China Sea, building artificial islands for military bases in international waters and other countries' territorial waters, and repeatedly threatened the small island nation of Taiwan and its allies. China and North Korea have more in common than just a border, and they might be tighter than ever. Under Xi Jinping, the current leader of the Chinese Communist Party, and now essentially China's dictator for life, China's been seeking to surpass the United States as the world superpower. Most analysts say they have a long way to go before this is even a remote possibility, but China's tactics indicate they're playing the long game. This includes trying to create global alliances with countries opposed to US hegemony, including outlaw nations like Iran, Russia, and yes, even North Korea. But the relationship between the two neighboring countries is complex and has been for a long time. China had close relations with the Korean government in exile during the period where Japan occupied Korea. But when communism swept through the nation, things took a very different turn. As soon as the communists began battling for control of Korea, China recognized them as the country's legitimate government. While the Korean War ended in a stalemate with two countries and a demilitarized zone, neither Korea has ever recognized the other as a legitimate government. Both recognized themselves as the rightful government of all Korea over 70 years later. But Korea might be a little more than a pawn in a much bigger game. As Korea was part of China's future plans in the 1950s, China was part of the Soviet Union, and the leaders of that massive superpower largely directed China's foreign policy in the early years. However, distance would be growing between the two, and China soon invested more heavily in Korea. Chinese forces battled US and UN-backed forces in Korea, although both sides held off on the heavier artillery to prevent the outbreak of World War III. As the war settled down, the new regime in Pyongyang, led by the first member of the Kim clan, Kim Il-sung, received heavy support from China and the Soviet Union's Eastern Bloc. But things have gotten much more complicated since. China and North Korea, as the most powerful communist countries in Asia, were natural allies. But as early as the 1960s, conflict was starting to arise. At first, it was actually North Korea that seemed to be the more conservative, with Mao's brutal policies in the Cultural Revolution being criticized. There were even brief armed clashes across the border in 1969. However, the rise of new leadership offered promise. Mao's successor reached out to Pyongyang to apologize for some of the tension, but when Deng Xiaoping took the helm in the 1980s, conflict rose again. Deng was a reformer and wanted to open China's economy, while North Korea was still staunchly communist. And no one lives forever. Kim Il-sung was a hardliner, but he was also a veteran of statecraft. While North Korea was highly repressive under him, people largely knew what to expect from the patriarch of the Kim dynasty. But he passed away in 1994 after decades in power and was replaced by the only logical successor. That would be his son, Kim Jong-il. Raised in the halls of power and taught to think of himself as the inevitable leader of the one-party state, Kim Jong-il quickly proved to be more eccentric and volatile than his father, and the buildup of tension between the two regimes wouldn't stop there. China under Deng Xiaoping and later Hu Jintao was interested in playing the long game, and that included opening trade and diplomatic relations with South Korea. That was a massive problem for North Korea and led to a brief Cold War between the two. During this period, North Korea's economy heavily declined. China wound up subsidizing trade with them to avoid a worsening famine and to avoid a mass influx of North Korean refugees at their border. When the younger Kim took over, he stepped up his country's nuclear program and would soon be taking a bigger role on the world stage. And with another change in power would come even more changes. Under Kim Jong-il, North Korea's reputation as a radical wild card increased, especially once the country got the nuclear bomb in 2006. Heavily sanctioned but defiant, North Korea leaned heavily on its few remaining allies as it maintained its insular aggressive foreign policy. That included China, but the alliance was hardly rock solid, especially once Kim Jong-il unexpectedly died in 2011 after an illness. His replacement once again was his son Kim Jong-un, who took office at only 29 years old. Once again raised under the North Korean system, he was seen as the most unpredictable and extreme North Korean leader yet, and China was not enthusiastic about dealing with him. While only a few years later, China and North Korea had proclaimed a year of friendship and tightened relations, in 2012 Hu Jintao met with dissident members of the North Korean leadership that planned to replace the youngest Kim with his more stable brother. One of the plotters was Kim Jong-un's uncle, who would later be executed for treason. China failed to inform Kim of the plot against his life, and he's never trusted them fully since. North Korea stepped up their aggressive foreign policy even against China, capturing Chinese fishing boats and holding them and their crew for ransom. As the nuclear program in North Korea steps up, scientists in the nation aim to build a missile that can hit anywhere in the world. China's become increasingly vocal about its differences with its radical neighbor, often seeing North Korea as a nuisance that distracts it from its largest goals. And despite that, they can't really quit being friends. Why does China put up with North Korea and maintain them as an ally, despite what are usually one-sided provocations from North Korea? Under Kim Jong-un, the Hermit Kingdom is more belligerent than ever and has even fewer allies. But despite this, China continues to maintain robust economic relations with North Korea. Many Chinese companies are sanctioned by the US for violating sanctions against North Korea. That might be changing. By 2017, China was backing sanctions against North Korea, and North Korean state media was publicly attacking China. But under Xi Jinping, things might be reversing, with the powerful Chinese leader visiting North Korea and North Korea backing China on internationally condemned moves like the Xinjiang concentration camps and the political takeover of Hong Kong. So why do they keep coming back to each other? That might be best explained by an old-school cop movie trope. You've all seen the interrogation. The criminal is in the holding cell, and the two cops come in. One offers the suspect a cup of coffee, and the other is holding a phone book ready to tune him up if he's not compliant. It's a highly effective tactic, at least in the movies, and China and North Korea might be trying to play good cop, bad cop on a global scale. North Korea, under the newest member of the Kim family, fits the role naturally, often releasing belligerent statements of nuclear annihilation for the slightest provocation. China, meanwhile, is there to calm them down and keep North Korea under control, just so long as the US keeps China happy. And like it or not, North Korea and China really can't distance themselves from each other. North Korea and China share a land border of over 1,400 kilometers, North Korea's most accessible border. The border with South Korea is marred by the massive demilitarized zone, a dangerous no-go zone for civilians, while the sea borders are highly guarded. That means the land border with China is the most convenient spot for travel and has been a popular spot for refugees. During the 1950s and the 1960s, many people flooded into North Korea from China, something that seems unthinkable now. The border from North Korea is highly guarded, but a few high-profile refugees have managed to escape to China. Same goes for trade, as the port city of Dandong on the North Korean border is where much of the trade between the two countries happens. And China has itself kept heavily invested in North Korea. Aid to North Korea makes up almost half of all Chinese foreign aid, making China North Korea's top trade partner. Without China, North Korea would likely fully descend into famine again, with no way to get basic supplies and no one to sell its goods to, which include a healthy store of metals and rare earth minerals from its mining industry. China also provides vital financial support to North Korea, although its largest bank has participated in cutting off North Korea's banks from the international banking system. So China continues to send mixed messages, joining in the international community in key sanctions while also regularly helping North Korea subvert those very same sanctions. But the bond between the two of them are a long way off from what they were during the Cold War. North Korea needs China, but China might need North Korea too. North Korea and South Korea have been a flashpoint for decades, but now a different flashpoint might be putting it out of the spotlight. The tensest spot in all of Asia at the moment is Taiwan, the prosperous island nation that gained independence during the Chinese Civil War. While mainland China was taken over by the communists, Taiwan was kept by the pro-Western military forces and in the decades since has transformed into a powerful economy and a thriving democracy. Much like in Korea, neither side recognizes the other. Taiwan's government maintains that it was the legitimate government of China, and China maintains that Taiwan is a rogue province that will be brought under its leadership by any means necessary. And the beat of war drums are getting louder. As Western nations increase diplomatic relationships with Taiwan and deepen economic cooperation while Taiwan continues to ramp up production of the world's largest factories making essential semiconductors, China becomes increasingly belligerent. They've regularly conducted war games in Taiwan's waters, bullied Taiwan's pro-Western neighbors like Japan, and made belligerent threats toward the United States should they defend Taiwan. And in a case like that, having a belligerent bad cop on a leash could be very helpful. Could North Korea join China in a war over Taiwan? No one is really able to predict this, given how insular and unpredictable the country and particularly Kim Jong-un are. However, South Korea is likely to be strongly on the side of the US and Taiwan in a regional war, and might even be tempted to join the fight. It would be strongly beneficial to China if one of the region's strongest militaries was suddenly tied up by an invasion coming from the north. While North Korea going all out and attacking Seoul might draw the US into a war to defend it, it would also divide the US focus in the region. While it's not likely China could directly order North Korea to aid it in this way, the chaos of the war might give it some influence, and there is no doubt that North Korea would love to get a chance to get revenge on its neighbors in the hated South. But China's biggest investment might actually go much further north. North Korea and South Korea is a slow-boiling conflict that's never quite ended. Taiwan is heating up, but remains a Cold War at the moment. However, there is one war that's gotten very hot, and all the world is focused on it. Russia v. Ukraine has dominated the headlines for the last year, with Russia at first expected to have an easy victory. It didn't go well, and Ukraine performed an underdog run that not only made history but captivated the world and pulled in a lot of help from the Western world. Russia and China are closely aligned, with both seeking to influence the world away from US influence and toward their sphere. As the war began, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin expressed their support for their partnership, and Xi seemed to approve of Putin's assault on Ukraine. But then something happened. Russia started losing badly. First, the invasion stalled when the Russian attempt to encircle Kyiv failed and Ukraine maintained control over the majority of the country. Once it became clear that this was a war and not a fast and simple conquest, Western aid started pouring into Ukraine, and Russia was hit with devastating sanctions that resembled those put on North Korea on a much larger scale. Russia found itself cut off from the global economy, desperate to get not just supplies but the weaponry it would need to keep waging its war, and it found itself with only a few allies. Russia found itself relying on weapons and military supplies from fellow outlaw nations Iran and North Korea, both of whom it saw as a proxy war between Russia and NATO, and loved the idea of weakening the US and its allies. Other pro-Russian countries like Venezuela, Syria, and Belarus had little in the way of resources to provide given their own situations. But there was one country sitting on the fence: China. Outwardly, China was all in favor of the war, making supportive comments toward Russia and even offering to negotiate a peace deal that would likely partition Ukraine. But there was one thing they would not do. China didn't participate in the sanctions against Russia and kept its economy with the country fully open. Russia could rely on China to deliver military supplies, resources, and other goods with one exception: lethal aid. China has so far refused to give Russia any weapons or get directly involved in the war in any way. And as Russia's supplies get desperately low, Vladimir Putin is getting increasingly impatient with his neighbor to the south. But despite this, Xi Jinping has stayed firm, frequently hinting that China might be about to start providing weapons to keep the US on its toes, but never actually doing it, even as Russia runs out of key supplies. And they might have an out. China's biggest reason for not providing weapons to Russia is probably self-interest. Doing so might open them up to serious secondary sanctions that could harm the Chinese economy, and they have a lot more to lose than Russia or North Korea does. China's economy is the second biggest in the world, and it does an enormous amount of trade with the countries that are currently arming the Ukrainian defenders. If it firmly gets on the side of Russia and turns this into a full proxy war, that could all come crashing down and stop decades of economic progress in its tracks. It might be worth it to create a new world order, but right now, Russia looks like a loser, and China isn't willing to risk the whole house of cards if it's not confident that Russia can finish the job even with Chinese weapons. Which is why an old frenemy might be able to give China a different route. Unlike China, North Korea has not been shy about which side it falls on in the Russia-Ukraine war. North Korea's foreign policy is based around one thing: opposing the US and its allies, and it's been a consistent, strong supplier of Russia since the start of the war. It's provided the massive country with both military supplies and deadly weapons like guns, missiles, and drones. What is the rest of the world going to do to them? Sanction them? North Korea is already under many of the same sanctions as Russia. Both North Korea and Iran have little to fear from the United States, barring a massive escalation. But China only has outsized influence on one of these countries. Is China actually influencing North Korea on what aid they're giving to Russia? It's impossible to know, but relations between the two countries have warmed in the recent years, with China largely being North Korea's lifeline to the outside world. If China wanted to coordinate its Russia strategy through North Korea, odds are that North Korea would have little choice but to listen, especially if they both came from the same place of wanting to see the US badly humbled in the biggest conflict in the world. And so North Korea might have secretly made itself indispensable. China has played a delicate game over the last few decades, especially under Xi Jinping, as it attempts to be a good cop and a bad cop at the same time. As the good cop, it seeks to expand its influence overseas through financial investments. This includes both trade deals with massive nations, thanks to its robust manufacturing sector, and heavy investments in developing nations. In Africa in particular, China is opening many factories and offering jobs to the residents. Its economy continues to grow, although there are many warning signs about troubled waters, thanks to its aging population and increasing isolation politically. And that last part is largely due to the flip side of the coin. China has maintained an aggressive posture in foreign policy, and not just when it comes to Taiwan. In the South China Sea, China continues to encroach on its neighbors. It's increasingly threatening toward US-aligned neighbors and cracks down on anyone who speaks out against some of its widely condemned policy, like the Uyghur concentration camps in Xinjiang. But most of its threats are largely bluster. Its threat to shoot down Nancy Pelosi's plane if she visited Taiwan on a diplomatic visit, killing the Speaker of the House at the time, would not be seen as a diplomatic incident, it would be seen as a declaration of war. And when China's bluff was called, they backed down. Which is why China might need North Korea more than ever. China and North Korea maintain a through line of trade, which could be a key way for China to provide lethal aid to Russia without actually committing to it in the eyes of the world. Shipments between China and North Korea can't be inspected without the consent of either country, and neither is about to agree. That means China could easily send weapons to North Korea, allow North Korea to send them to Russia, and maintain deniability. While this would be of a smaller scale than if China actually committed to aiding Russia militarily, it might serve China's interests. After all, China doesn't have any reason to really care about the fate of Ukraine, but it does want to keep the US and NATO tied up in Eastern Europe, sending more and more military resources and draining their stores, because China might be waiting for the right moment to make a move. Many people think China is running out of time to invade Taiwan, for a lot of reasons. Its population is aging, its youth are now more willing to question the country's policies, and a full invasion with a draft could see a revolt similar to the one Putin is putting down in Russia. Additionally, while Taiwan's semiconductor facilities are the grand prize of any battle over Taiwan, TSMC is increasingly diversifying around the world, opening up new facilities in friendly countries, making it much harder for China to seize control of the industry and use it to blackmail the world. And as the war in Ukraine winds down, the US and its allies could move a large amount of their resources to defend Taiwan, a war that China could likely not win outright, which means that China might be ready to unleash the dogs. Right now, China is the most powerful country in the region, but it might not be the most feared. North Korea's increasingly belligerent rhetoric makes it a good distraction and a convenient shield for China in the event of a war. North Korea could attack troops in the region in solidarity with China, or mount a full assault on South Korea to open up a new front in the war. The only thing that is for sure is that China's outreach to North Korea in recent years isn't for neighborly reasons. It's because Xi Jinping has made a concentrated effort to cultivate North Korea as an asset. So, is a new Russia-China-North Korea axis forming? In a word, probably no. There are three countries along with Iran who have been cooperating. They ultimately have only one thing in common: they hate the US and want to weaken it. But that doesn't mean their interests align in other areas, particularly in the case of China, North Korea, and Russia. All three have territorial conflicts with each other that have even escalated to armed conflict in the past. But China is playing a high-wire act, trying to create a new world order where the opposition has equal power to the United States. But it wouldn't be an equal alliance. It would have China at the top, and that would allow China to continue expanding its sphere of influence in the South China Sea, Africa, and beyond. All it would take was a few key strategic victories, which might require the help of some allies in the region. But to get there, the unstable, volatile country of the Korean Peninsula that keeps shooting at its neighbors might be more than just strategically useful, it might be indispensable. Want to know more about what it's like to live in the most repressive country in the world? Check out regular things that are illegal in North Korea, or watch this video instead.